Most people think losing their home to a nursing home lien is something that only affects families with modest estates. But wealthier families face risks that are just as serious and often far more costly. Families with businesses, investments, rental properties, and large retirement accounts often assume they are safe because they're not going to need Medicaid, but you can lose more money through outdated planning, bad planning, or no planning at all than you ever could to a Medicaid lien. If you're new here, I'm Jesse Bifulco, estate planning and elder law attorney, and this is part 3 of our 3-part series on avoiding probate in 2026. Today we're talking about the traps that silently drain wealth in larger estates, the strategies that no longer work the way families think they do, and the mistakes that can cost millions of dollars without anyone realizing it until it's too late. In part 1, we talked about probate avoidance traps and how simple shortcuts can cause tax problems and inheritance problems. In part 2, we talked about expanded estate recovery and how avoiding probate does not protect the home from long-term care costs, Medicaid recovery liens. But in part 3, we're shifting gears a bit. We're shifting to the issues that affect larger estates because wealthy families do not usually lose money for want of probate avoidance. They lose money through taxes, mistitled assets, outdated trusts, uncoordinated planning, and decisions that seemed smart years ago but are catastrophic today. One of the biggest traps wealthier families fall into is the belief that because they already have a trust, they're protected. In planning, where the cost of long-term care isn't the primary issue, the real issues become management during incapacity, keeping the estate from being looted, and preventing somebody who's close to you from changing your plan if you start to lose your mental acuity. Those issues are very real and very human, but the issues we're dealing with in this episode are more technical. I once had a client ask me to estimate his estate tax liability. And when I told him it was going to cost his heirs $5 million when he died, he said, well, they're still getting a lot of money, so I'm fine with that. His estate could have avoided that tax. We could have made a plan to avoid it. But he didn't want to go through the trouble of estate planning to minimize the tax and save the $5 million. And I can understand his position, although I don't agree with it. Buying an estate plan for an estate that's large enough to pay gift taxes is like buying a Formula One race car. You don't just buy the car. You need a whole team of expert mechanics to keep the thing together. You also cannot buy the parts for your Formula One race car at AutoZone. The more complex the estate is, the more you need a lawyer who specializes in high net worth estate planning and a CPA who also knows about those issues. Sometimes you need an insurance expert. Sometimes you need financial advice as well. And it should include annual maintenance from people who know this stuff. But it's one thing to decide you'd rather avoid the complexity and pay more in taxes, and it's another to accidentally pay more than you need to because your plan wasn't up to date. When I ask families with significant net worth when they last reviewed their trust with current tax laws in mind, the answer is almost always that they signed it 20, sometimes 30 years ago and haven't looked at it since. Some think that because they paid a lot of money, and by a lot I mean a mere fraction of the tax savings, that the plan and the cost was a one and done. And then they think a lawyer is going to analyze their tax exposure, all of their asset values and the basis and fair market values and all the ownership structures and compliance with their prior plan, et cetera, that some lawyer is going to do all that work for free. What they don't realize is that a trust that was perfect in 2000 can be disastrous in 2026. And it takes work to determine the exposure. It's not, it takes, you have to examine the assets. It doesn't just, you can't just look at a sheet of paper and go, oh yeah, here's what we need to do to fix it. And that brings me that brings me to a story that shows exactly how this happens. I was talking with a young man in an airport lounge. He recognized me from one of my seminars, and we started chatting. He told me his grandparents, we'll call them the Lawsons, had a $40+ million estate that took years to settle. Then he said something that caught my attention. He said, "You know what's strange? My friend's family avoided almost all of the estate taxes we had to pay, and their estate was about the same value as ours. The difference was they updated their planning, and we didn't." He told me the story. His friend's family had once lived in New York, a state with a harsh estate tax, but on the advice of their planners, they moved out years earlier and updated the plan every few years. Every time the law changed, their attorney updated their trusts, rebalanced their assets, fixed old formulas, and made sure the plan still worked. The friend said, "My parents always said the plan isn't the documents. The plan is the updating of the documents." Then the Lawson grandson told me what happened in their family. His grandparents did all the right things back in the 90s and, the early 2000s. He said, they used that alphabet soup of tax saving strategies their lawyer suggested. He didn't use that word, but I use that word. It came with a big diagram. They set up a family limited partnership. They created a GRAT. They made annual exclusion gifts. They bought a large insurance policy inside an irrevocable trust. At the time, that was cutting-edge planning, but nobody touched any of it for 20 years. When his grandfather died, every outdated element of that plan came crashing into the tax code of 2026. The GRAT had ended and dumped highly appreciated assets back into the taxable estate. The family partnership discounts were counting on were now vulnerable under new IRS scrutiny. The life insurance trust had never had the GST exemption allocated, so distributions to the grandchildren were hit with a tax they never should have owed. And because the partnership interests had been gifted over many years, the children inherited the cost basis. When they sold real estate to pay the estate tax, the capital gains tax bill was enormous. They were hit from both directions, estate tax and income tax. And the biggest surprise wasn't even federal. Their state's estate tax exemption was only $1 million. Everything above that was taxable. The Lawson grandson said, "The plan froze 20 years ago, but I guess the law didn't." That story captures the danger with larger estates. The issues get complicated. Basis, adjusted basis, capital gains exposure, estate tax exposure, gift tax rules, state inheritance tax rules, the generation skipping transfer tax. It's enough to make your head spin. There's retirement account distribution rules that affect taxes. These are not probate problems. These are tax planning problems. And if the plan doesn't evolve with the law, these problems can destroy wealth. Many families begin lifetime gifting because someone once told them that gifting reduces estate tax. That's true, I guess, but it's way more complicated than that. That advice made sense years ago and not for every estate or every asset. But today, those completed gifts can be financially devastating because lifetime gifts transfer the parents' original cost basis to the children, and when the children sell the property, the capital gains tax can be enormous. Retirement accounts create a different kind of trap because large IRAs or retirement portfolios often must be emptied within 10 years under current law, forcing taxation, sometimes at the worst possible time in the beneficiaries' lives. And when wealthy parents leave IRAs to trusts for creditor protection, the trust may not qualify for favorable payout rules, causing the IRA to be taxed at the trust's extremely high tax bracket, the compressed rates. Other families lose wealth because old formula clauses in their trusts still operate as if the estate tax exemption were $600,000 instead of $12 million. These old formulas force assets into restrictive trusts that no longer save taxes but can create massive capital gains exposure. These are the traps that wealthy families face, and they are the traps that quietly destroy wealth. If you want to protect a large estate, the lesson is simple. Probate avoidance is not your issue. Your issue is tax basis planning, capital gains exposure, estate tax exposure, inheritance tax exposure, generation skipping transfer tax allocation, retirement account planning, and making sure every asset is aligned with today's law, not yesterday's, and the most efficient transfer strategies. Because ultimately what a lot of these clients are interested in is, preserving what they've got, what they've managed to manage well and increase during their lives or earn or inherited. They want to be good stewards of that money, but they don't want to lose it, any more of it to taxes than they absolutely must. Wealth doesn't protect itself, right? That's the bottom line. Now, a brief nod to what I call the soft planning issues. It is one thing to disinherit your family because they deserve it. It's a very different thing to have your intentions changed after you lose your mental capacity. Statistically, as we age, our brains change and we become susceptible to suggestion. We can become isolated as we travel less. And sometimes our affections reorient, not because we don't lose the love of our family, but because we see them less, and we're surrounded by caregivers who aren't necessarily our family. Those strangers can become the target of our exaggerated sense of gratitude and our failing memories. I was looking at a video of my kids when they were little at the airport where I had that conversation I told you about. I was bored and going through my phone, and this old memory just popped up on my social media post. I instantly felt a flood of affection for my kids. It's hard to imagine a future me where I could be tricked into signing my estate over to a paid caregiver, but I see this happen all the time. Every good plan not only takes into consideration changes in the tax code, but also changes in you. Only a plan that evolves with the law and with your family can truly protect what you've built. We've covered a lot in this series. Avoiding probate is important, but it's not a strategy. Avoiding nursing home loss is essential, but it does not happen automatically. And protecting a large estate requires coordinated tax planning, asset alignment, and a plan that's updated as the law changes. If this episode helped you, hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you wanted covered next. Your questions shape the future of this channel. As we continue building LifeCounsel, I will be bringing you more tools and resources to help you create a plan that actually works when your family needs it most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.